One really great use in the real world for the offset function is to actually create dynamic named ranges. If I take you back to the Stock Data International file, and if you recall doing this, we had a VLOOKUP in here that looked up the item reference code and returned the stock, description, price, quantity, etc. Now there was one slight issue in that if we went into the items and added a new item at the bottom here, let's call it test 01, my test item, and we'll give it a price, 6 and a bit. When we come back to the order form template and we add in test 01, we see that nothing gets returned because we're getting a non-applicable, an NA. Even if I put some quantities in, we get an NA. So what we need to be able to do is expand the stock named range. So that's what's being used here, the stock named range. Now if we have a look at what that covers and go to stock, you'll see that it stops at the previously extended stock list, which was the Wildlife Latte gift box mug. It doesn't include my new item. Now we could make sure we always add new items into the named range or extend the named range, but it would be so much easier and less work in the long run if our stock named range could actually dynamically increase its size. That is achievable through the offset function. So if we go to the name manager on the formulas ribbon, there's our stock reference, and it refers to items $A $1 to $N $275. Well, I'd like to replace the N275 with a formula that actually picks up the end cell itself. So we come down here and we're actually going to start our named range here. Let's remove everything because it gets itself in a little bit of a twist. So equals. So instead of referencing the sheet directly and the cells we're going to use, we're going to make use of the offset function. And we'll use the offset function to determine the range. So offset. First point of the offset function. The other thing is you need to remember the parts now because we don't have the little help tips because we're not in a cell, but we'll manage. So the first part is the reference point. So where to start from? Well, the place I would like to start from is the items sheet and the first cell. So $A $1, comma. What about my horizontal rows? How far would I like to move? I wouldn't like to move at all. So that's a 0, comma. And what about the columns? How far I would like to move? I wouldn't like to move that at all. So really, I'm not offsetting the start point. I'm really using the offset function and its capability to highlight a range here. Comma, how many rows? So what's the height of my range? Well, that's the bit that needs to be dynamic. So in order to determine how many rows there are, we're going to count how many of them actually have something in them. So we'll use the count A function, and that's going to count $A, colon, $A. So it's going to count how many rows within the first column actually have some content. And that's going to determine how high to spread the range that feeds my named range. Comma. The last part is how many columns. So what's the width of my little offset range? Now we could use a count A there to determine how many of the columns have some content, but that's unlikely to be dynamic and need to add in further columns. So I'm going to set that to the actual current width, which is 14 columns, and then close brackets. So my whole offset function is what will now drive the range for the named range. So it'll still have the same name, it will still be called stock, but we're effectively driving this section here, which is the height of the area by counting the number of cells. Tick to accept that, close, and then when we go back into our order form template, you can see that test 01, I've done nothing to change the formula or change the range manually. I've replaced it with a dynamic offset function. It's now able to pull out my test item. So again, if I went back into the items and added in another, Guy 0001, Guy's mug, very expensive. Then we should find, when we go back to the order form and now order Guy 0001, it fills in Guy's mug. So it's dynamically extended the stock named range by using the offset function. So in the name manager, you can see that is in action there. There's offset, start point, no offset on the start point, but we're dynamically counting the number of rows with content and then using the same number of columns, so 14 columns.